Thank you. I'm going to call taxes back to order out of recess. So, we're coming out of recess now. Excuse me. There was a lot of confusion. You can just do it. We're not sure that everybody knows we're reconvening, so we're trying to get that message out right now to all tax committee members that we're reconvening. So, but we have a quorum from before, so we're going to continue on. Representative Davids and I were just talking. I think what we're going to do is continue on tax bill testimony, because a number of people talked to me after and they did want to testify still. So we'll do that. We are going to take up the Hortman bill. And I know she's around somewhere, and we'll hear that one. That shouldn't take too long. Then we're going to recess briefly. Then we're going to come back. We're going to take up the transportation bill so we can get that out, and then we'll return to the tax bill again. So I don't know how much sense that made, Mr. Chair or Representative Davids.
Well,
does that make sense?
We do have the author of the Hortman bill here.
Oh, there she is. Okay. I think she wanted to. I think we're going to take a little public, do you want to go ahead, Rep. Hortman? Okay, all right, so we're going to go back to testimony on the governor's, or not the governor's. That was a different day. Testimony on the House Omnibus Tax bill. Mr. Hickey, are you still here? Yes. Welcome to the committee. Perfect. Welcome.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mike Hickey with the National Federation of Independent Business. We're the state's leading small business group and largest business group in terms of entities with 13,000 members statewide. This tax bill is a real mixed bag. There's some positives in here and one on a long time priority of NFIB, but Madam Chair and members, the negative far outweighs the positive. And I think we have a very controversial, almost red hot.
Excuse me, testimony was over actually. I'm kidding. You said it far outweighs it. I apologize. I thought you were going to say really good things. That's why I was, no. I'm kidding, Mr. Hickey. Go ahead. I apologize.
I think we got our signals mixed. No.
Yeah, I think so.
I am going to get to those good things, but first I have to address some of these red hot or white hot items here. But the income tax provision, we think, is just a really big mistake for this state. It really sends a negative signal about, one, how Minnesota deals with a pretty small deficit, and two, about how a high-tax state is apparently going to make things a lot worse in the eyes of investors, entrepreneurs, and especially people outside of Minnesota who might be looking to engage in commerce in this state. I realize, Madam Chair, these new thresholds are much higher than the governor's proposal, and they certainly exempt a lot of NFIB members. But at the same time, I think what we have to be mindful of when we did the analysis, or when House Research did the analysis on the governor's proposal, 6% of the small businesses were affected, clearly the most successful, and clearly those who are creating the most jobs, and clearly those who are going to lead us into this recovery or into a better recovery. It was only 6%, but it was 56% of the small business income. And we saw those numbers at the federal level, too, and this was being debated in the presidential race. A small minority of the small businesses were bringing in a significant amount of the income. Now, that's going to be negated to some degree by these high thresholds you have set up here at $400,000 and $500,000, but still, you're going to be hitting the most successful small business owners with these high rates, and really the people who are hiring the most people and creating the most jobs. And I think you need to be mindful of that. This is the third audience in this debate. It's just not wealthy corporate people, and it's just not wealthy people. These are hardworking, very successful small business people. They're going to be affected too. Mm-hmm. You also need to be mindful that out-of-state investors are going to be impacted by these rates if they invest in Minnesota flow-through companies. And in these situations, when you are invested in a flow-through company, you have to pay. You may be coming from a state that has no taxes. You may be coming from Florida. You may be coming from Texas. But you're going to have to pay Minnesota income taxes on part of what you make out of the Minnesota company, and it's going to be applied to your whole income through an apportion formula, which I'm not going to try to explain right now. But there is that factor too that you need to be aware of. And then finally, we're really discouraged to see if the street improvement fees provision was put in the bill. I know it may have been modified a bit, and I haven't had a chance to catch up with that yet. But we're in here just about a week ago and had a chance to share our thoughts with you about that. We think it's wide open. We think it far exceeds the authority they need, and it's in addition to all the other tools they have on street improvement. And so all those things are very concerning to us, and I hope they give you pause as they send this bill to the House floor and into conference committee. I did say there were some positives. I really want to thank you, Madam Chair, for putting a long-time NFIB priority, and that is trying to improve our estate tax law and the provision trying to make improvements on the estate tax is much appreciated. It includes trusts for small businesses and farms. So when a family does invest in a trust, that will be included now in this dramatic exemption increase we had from $1 million to $5 million that came out of the special session government shutdown. And so that was a huge positive for those of us who care about the estate tax to have that occur back during that red-hot July of 2011. So we appreciate that. We appreciate some of the one-time features in the bill, the Section 179 provision, the upfront exemption on the capital equipment. These are long-time problems that I know you're trying to make progress on, and the federal government keeps can't keep up with the conformity because we actually balance our budgets here, unlike what's going on in Washington. So thanks for the time, but we're just very concerned about this income tax proposal. I believe for 500,000 to $1 million, possibly, we're going to have the highest in the country during this 2-year period, because I believe the California 1% surtax is on millionaires. And so I think there's a pretty good possibility. I was talking to a colleague, 501,000 to $1 million in Minnesota will be the highest rate in the nation for people in that bracket for that 2-year period. And this is just very concerning and sends a very negative signal to the people who invest in companies and create jobs. And thanks for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey. Other testifiers for or against this bill? Mr. Shetman, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Judd Shetman. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Metropolitan Council, and I'd like to thank the committee for including our regional transit capital bonds in the bill. They are located in the public finance article under Section 11, and these bonds, again, help the council and all regional transit providers to replace small capital issues for each of our providers. So it's Metro Transit, Metro Mobility, all the opt-out providers, and regional dial rides. So again, I just would like to say thank you and to Representative Earhart for carrying the bill. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being here. Other testifiers for or against the bill? Please. Anybody? Mr. Munson, come on down. I heard you were just driving in. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Lenczewski. My name is Greg Munson. I oversee the development activities for McGough Companies in St. Paul. I wanted to thank everyone on the committee for getting a great tax bill put together this year. Representative Davids for your past work on this, and particularly Chair Lenczewski, who over the past year has worked very hard to help us identify great solutions to a great project that's been kind of hampered by the recession and some of the challenges, but we've got a great solution. It's a great bill, and I thank you, the employees of McGough, who've been on the bench seeking work for a long time over the last few years. Thank you, and appreciate the support.
Thank you for coming down, Mr. Munson. Appreciate it. Further time, Mr. Griffith, welcome. I didn't see you there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Very briefly, just want to thank you for your support of the Mall of America project. My name is Bill Griffith. I'm representing Mall of America. Kurt Hagen's in New York today, seeking private financing. So
we like that.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank Chair Lenczewski.
Sorry, Mr. Griffith, somebody's phone must be on or near the mic. Just checking mine, it was off. We have the power off, not just the sound off. Well, there we go. Okay, Mr. Griffith. Could have been you.
I think it might have been.
Yeah, well, you're excused because you didn't know. You're not here regularly. So
all right,
please.
Thank you.
Sorry.
A couple things. First of all, we've been working for quite some time to try and find the right mix of support for the project. We think it's there. We think it's in this bill. Also, you may have noted the opening of the Radisson Blu at Mall of America last month. It's just great to see the project open, the energy, folks going to work at the Blu, reservations throughout the year. It's just terrific to actually see one of these come to fruition, and one that was built and opened during a very difficult time. And so we want to continue that success and keep the momentum going. So again, thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for being here. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Rudlang.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Shane Rudlang with the City of Bloomington Port Authority, representing the city and the Port Authority today. Just like to say a big thanks to members of the committee, and especially Chair Lenczewski for authoring the bill that provides funding for 3 very important projects in Bloomington, those being the Mall of America, Bloomington Central Station, and the Old Cedar Bridge project. With that, I'll keep it brief. I know you have a long list of people that want to testify, and happy to answer any questions if that's appropriate.
Thank you for coming down. We're not taking questions till we're all the way through, so thank you both for being here. Further testifiers, Ms. Jackson and, is it, I think of you as Lynette. Is it, what's your last name? It's a hyphen name, something Crandall. Okay, first I guess we're going to take this gentleman first, so then you guys jump up after that. Please, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Mike Wallenius. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Untitled Corporation. We're the world's largest producer of frac sand, and we've been in Minnesota for 43 years in LeSueur County producing frac sand. We've covered a lot of areas in other testimony, so I won't go back to that. But
and we're limiting folks to just a few minutes, too, so
gotcha.
If you don't want to do that, trust me.
Gotcha. The frac industry is very competitive. It's a fairly common commodity. It cannot support additional taxes. The highest state tax on sand is 2 cents per ton, and Minnesota is 15 cents per ton currently. The highest tax in a state in which we operate producing frac sand is 1.5 cents per ton. So at 15 cents per ton, Minnesota's already 10 times higher than the next highest state for taxation on sand. Currently, we would pay $750,000 per year in sand tax. With the proposed bill here, the tax we would pay annually would be about $4.7 million. Again, this is we're already the highest tax state at 10 times, and if this bill were to pass in its current form, we would be 62 times higher than the next highest state. So this is a situation that we find to be not good for our workers and not good for our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate you coming. And I think the Mayo folks were they were coming to the table, and then, I don't know. Oh, sure. Mr. Makarios, Mr. Melander, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Who'd like to? Mr. Makarios, welcome to the
Madam
committee.
Chair, thank you very much. Kyle Makarios with the Carpenters Union. Madam Chair and committee members, I just want to thank you and let the committee know how excited we are about the incredible opportunities for construction workers that will come about as a result of this bill. We've appeared in front of this committee many times before on behalf of projects like Mall of America and Bloomington Central Station. Very excited to see the provisions in this bill. We think that these are going to produce results for thousands and thousands of construction workers and will have an enormous impact on our industry. So thank you for including these provisions and for, Madam Chair, for your work on making these provisions work. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Makarios. Thanks for coming down. And President Melander, nice to see you. Welcome.
Nice to see you. Chair, committee members, my name is Harry Melander. I'm with the Minnesota Building and Construction Trades Council. And just to follow up on Kyle's comments, not only those projects in Bloomington that'll put thousands of people to work, but I'm really here to talk about the opportunity of a lifetime of a generation of what we have going down in Rochester, Minnesota with the DMC. This is one of those projects, as we've mentioned at other times during when we've testified, this is a generational project, projects where individuals and their children can work on. So we're very excited about it. We're very appreciative that it's still in the mix. It's a great project. And would really appreciate you making sure it moves forward because it is good not only for southeastern Minnesota but all of us in the construction industry. So thank you again.
Thank you for coming down. We appreciate your testimony. Thanks for being here. And is it Miss
Lisa Clark?
Lisa Clark and Miss Lynette Slater
Crandall.
I have to write that down.
Madam
There's a
Chair.
band named. There's a band. Have you heard this? There's a band named Slater Kenny. Have you ever heard of them?
Oh, I haven't. I'll check
Well,
it out.
there's a
on
band,
iTunes.
Slater Kenny, and whenever I hear your name, I think of that band. So you'll have to go look them up. They have a very similar name to a different band. Miss Jackson, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Lisa Clark, and I'm with Mayo
Clark,
Clinic.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Jackson works for me, actually.
Lisa Clark, I apologize.
I'll look that up on iTunes.
And we've met so many times that I should have had that right. I apologize. So my sincere
No apology necessary. I work for Mayo Clinic, and I'm the administrator for the Destination Medical Center proposal. And first, I want to say thank you to all of you, those of you that worked around this table to move this forward. A sincere thank you for that, for Representative Norton as well as Representative Lenczewski. We just want to say that we are very happy to have this bill moving forward, and we want to make sure that everybody understands our deep gratitude for that.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Welcome.
Madam Chair, again, it's Lynette Slater-Crandall with the Dorsey & Whitney Law Firm. I'm here as Economic Development Counsel to Mayo Clinic, and just wanted to let you know that I'm available, as well as other members of the DMC team. If there are questions as debate of the bill moves forward, we'll be happy to address those.
Great. Thank you for being here. We appreciate both of you being here. And again, I apologize, Ms. Clark. Sorry about
You'll
that.
never forget it.
Thank you so much. Further testimony. Welcome.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Madam Chair, my name is Jason George. I'm Legislative and Political Director for the Operating Engineers, Local 49. First, I want to say thank you to you in particular and your committee for your leadership on the building projects that my colleagues mentioned. I was going to put thousands of 49ers to work, so we really appreciate your work on Mayo and Bloomington Central Station in particular. On a different note, the sand tax issues, we continue to have concerns about the future of that industry in Minnesota with the current language that's in there. But on a positive note, we continue to have good faith in Representative Hansen, and we continue to work with him going forward on to address some of those concerns. And we're very confident in his leadership on that, so we look forward to working on it more.
Thank you, Mr. George. Appreciate you being here. Further testimony. You know, we should have closed testimony this morning because all these people are appearing. No, we're glad you're here. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Bryan. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Bryan Rock Products. I'm here to speak on the silica sand mining bill. Bryan Rock Products is a family-owned limestone mining company with several quarries in the Twin Cities metro area. We've been mining in Minnesota for 72 years, and my brother, who's here in the crowd behind me, are the fourth generation of the family to be involved with the company. In late 2010, we determined that underneath the quarries in Scott County there was a substantial deposit of high-quality silica sand. Because of the size and scope of the project, we determined that it would be necessary to conduct an environmental impact statement. For 2 years, we have been working with consultants, state agencies, Scott County staff, and township officials on that EIS. The cost of the review into the various units of government, which has been paid by us, the proposer today has been approximately $2 million invested in that review. We are very concerned with the new tax proposal. The tax rate for sand would become extremely high. Other competing states with silica sand have tax rates varying from 0 to 2 cents a ton, where with this bill, Minnesota producers could be paying upwards to $4 per ton. That would put Minnesota's producers at a huge competitive disadvantage. With such a huge disadvantage, how would projects like ours ever get the necessary capital needed to complete the project? Lenders and investors will look to other states to invest their capital where there's much less risk and the same quality of sand. These taxes would put in place a permanent moratorium on mines. In addition to imposing taxes that will inhibit our ability to compete in a national commodity market, this bill also creates a category as a qualified processor, which carries unintended consequences. It spells out specific methods of mining that may not be the best practice for that specific site. Some of the listed practices encourage higher water use, such as slurry lines and increased dewatering. The designation qualified processor does not take into account permit conditions that will already be required of the site, such as fugitive dust control and water management. Each mining site is unique, and a one-size-fits-all condition that determines who is a qualified processor will create unfair treatment among producers in the state. As producers, we go to great lengths to develop projects that both protect the environment and local communities we operate in. The bill also favors large producers because there are tax penalties on those who truck more than 10% of their product. They have larger capacities and therefore can move more tons by truck without penalty, while having a greater impact on the roads than smaller operators that can only truck the same 10% of a smaller capacity. Another question that arises from the bill is when the percentages of trucking versus rail are calculated and how those taxes will be paid. So silica sand mining represents the rare opportunity for our family-owned business to create a large number of new good-paying jobs, and we get to do so in the same communities we've been operating in for 60 years. Our project will create jobs very similar to the ones that already exist at Bryan Rock Products, the majority of which will be local union jobs. If projects like ours are not allowed to move forward, the annual economic benefit of the state and local communities could reach in the millions per year. In conclusion, we are not asking for any state subsidies to grow the industry. We only ask that you treat all companies the same and do not adopt new taxes that will kill this industry. Think of the message these taxes would send the business community, not only in Minnesota but throughout the nation. Let us create the new jobs and the economic benefits that come with our operations. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr.
Oh, and we'd also like to thank, Representative Hansen for his hard work on this bill. This bill has garnered a lot of interest from many parties, and he's worked very hard on it. We appreciate his openness in working with us.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Appreciate you being here. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Scott Sustachek. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Jordan Sands, which is headquartered in Mankato, Minnesota. Part of Coughlin Companies, and we've been mining dimensional limestone in Mankato for 125 years. Have expanded into children's book publishing and want to keep our businesses very misaligned and now want to go into industrial sand, but keep our quarries active and do a brownfield development on 70 acres in Mankato. We've talked to the committee previously about this tax bill, and I think there's been some improvement in it. Overall, we're still talking dollars of taxes here in Minnesota versus pennies in other states where we would compete against. I think that creates a competitive chasm for companies like ours that are trying to develop and build in this industry. We've made investment decisions and business model decisions well over a year ago, and as we've gone through our environmental process, we're nearing 90% complete with that environmental review. This tends to shift the ground rules substantially. It shifts the dollars substantially. And these are dollars that can't be passed on to our customers in any way, shape, or form. They'll just simply go to Wisconsin or Iowa or Nebraska to get their sand. This is an industry really, other than one significant multinational, is an industry that's just starting here in Minnesota and moving very slowly forward. We think this tax would certainly cause that industry to slow down substantially, if even stop. And the investment dollars that Mr. Bryan mentioned would stop flowing as well. Overall, I think that the 10% trucking for preferred competitors also creates two problems. One is it marries us as a producer to a single rail line, which will probably ultimately increase our shipping costs because it reduces our ability to ship to other rail lines nearby. Secondly, it also gives large producers who, the single biggest producer in the state, could ship as much by truck as we're proposing to do in total volume, therefore having a much bigger impact on the roads certainly than we would ever have. So again, that creates a competitive challenge. Overall, we think there's been improvement again on this. We appreciate Representative Hansen's openness to continue to work on this bill and try and make it better, and we look forward to keeping that work moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Sestacek. Not sure I said that right. And Ms. Narum, I apologize. I got the note up that you were here and didn't see you sitting right there. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kayla Narum. I'm from Andover, Minnesota. I'm a senior at the University of Minnesota and a volunteer with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I spoke to this committee 2 months ago about my father who passed away when I was 14 from a cancer caused by smoking. I came to testify to remember my dad, to let his memory live on, and hopefully in some small way be a part of making sure that no parent, child, sibling, or friend ever has to go through what me and my family and my dad went through. Today, with this bill, you've done just that. This bill will keep more than 47,000 kids from ever starting to smoke. Yes, this bill saves money, adds revenue, but more importantly, this bill will save lives. When I was 14, I thought my dad could never be that sick. He was still invincible in my young eyes. It's strange how the world works. Teaches you lessons, some bad, some good. People always have something negative to say about politics and politicians, but today you've restored my faith in that what we say and do matters, and for that I thank you. You had the courage to stand up to the tobacco industry. I know that there are many more hurdles to go through, and I hope that you will champion this bill, that you will encourage your colleagues to join you in passing this life-saving legislation. I hope you make your colleagues understand the historic importance of this legislation, its life-saving potential, and the devastating consequences of doing nothing. You had a choice to make. Faced with the facts, you chose to protect Minnesota kids and not the tobacco industry profits. Thank you for helping me honor my dad. Thank you on behalf of more than 5,000 families who will lose a loved one because of tobacco-related illness. And thank you on behalf of those kids who will never become addicted to tobacco.
Thank you, Ms. Narum, for being here. Mr. Waffler, welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my name is James Waffler. I'm here today representing Tiller Corporation, which has its headquarters in Maple Grove, Minnesota, but it operates all over Minnesota and western Wisconsin. It's a locally owned and operated company, established in 1946 and has 250 employees. Recently, Tiller invested over $15 million in a sand processing facility in North Branch, Minnesota. We've had tremendous support from the, excuse me a moment. We've had tremendous support from that city and and its mayor as a good job provider in their new industrial corridor. This project was fully vetted from an environmental perspective. The PCA says we are using the best available control technologies in this facility. We feel that the frac sand tax proposed in Article 11, Section 4, and later in Section 16, the doubling of the aggregate tax deserves serious reconsideration. This tax would adversely affect a company like Tiller Corporation, again, a locally owned and operated job provider. Since we compete in a national market, it would put us at a competitive disadvantage. We noticed that Section 4, Subdivision 3 would exempt from the tax some kinds of firms, but not others. We have no problem with an exemption as such, but we can scarcely see why one or a few companies might get this benefit and others would not. And we also feel doubling the existing aggregate tax in Article 11, Section 16 is excessively burdensome. We feel there is no need to hurry this issue along. It deserves further deliberation in the interest of tax fairness to Minnesota-based companies like Tiller. We are willing to work with you and Representative Hansen further to address our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waffler. Thank you for being here. Mr. Thorson, nice to see you.
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Thorson with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 5. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and comment on the Omnibus Tax Bill. I'll make my comments brief. I want to thank the Chair, Chair Davney, the members of the Property Tax Division that worked on the development of a new distribution formula for LGA. I think it's quite an achievement that the city groups can get together and come up with a single distribution formula that will take us hopefully into the next decade going forward and remove some of the acrimony that there's been regionally and with different types of cities. I think it's a significant achievement. I also appreciate the addition of the appropriation to Representative Lean's original bill to $80 million and the inclusion of an inflator with LGA. There's criticism that an inflator means LGA appropriation on autopilot, but it's inflation and population growth in Minnesota that's really on autopilot, and including the inflator that reflects population growth and inflation merely meets the need going forward. The last time there was an inflator included in the LGA formula in the 90s, groups didn't come back year after year asking for an additional appropriation of $50 or $100 million. It basically took the LGA conversation off the table for nearly a decade, and that's something we appreciate. We appreciate the other revenue raisers in this bill, in part because of what they're funding. They fund investments in the state that are sorely lacking. It's also been suggested there's not a lot of balance in this bill. To find the balance in this bill, I'd suggest looking back for a decade since 2003, what the budget solutions have been. I'd say the health impact fee that you turn into a tax in this bill is really the only revenue since 2002 that's been added to the budget solutions short of the revenue that's been picked up by tax conformity. And looking at what has been done, it's been cuts, it's been shifts, it's been one-time spending, it's been money from the feds. And this bill represents a sea change as it relates to dealing with the structural budget situation in the state, and puts us on a better path. And for that, we're in support of this bill and look forward to working with the committee going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Thorson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Frank Ungaro. I'm Executive Director of Mining Minnesota, representing all the non-ferrous copper-nickel exploration, mineral development, and mining companies that have a presence in the state of Minnesota. I'm here today to express our strong opposition to the provision that doubles the occupation tax on other ores in the state of Minnesota. We have an opportunity, second to none, to create jobs and economic benefit to this state through mineral development, literally thousands of jobs and billions, yes, billions of dollars to the school trust fund, and tens of millions of dollars each and every year, both to local government and tens of millions of dollars each and every year to state government through the existing level of taxation from net proceeds in occupation tax. This proposal would double the current level of the occupation tax before it even collects a single dime. We try to invite investment into the state of Minnesota. We believe this does just the opposite and sends a terrible message to the global investment community that is looking at investing billions and billions of dollars in mineral development here in the state of Minnesota. If anything, we believe the state should be looking at incentives, looking at the sales ratio and the occupation tax, possibly the apportionment that would put an incentive on value-added end products, finished metal products right here in the state of Minnesota for additional resources and revenue long-term. We look forward to working with the state on incentives that will create this development and have a reality of these revenues coming to the state of Minnesota along with the jobs. And at this time, we oppose the occupation tax increase. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Ungaro. Mr. Botzik, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Gary Botzik for the Minnesota Association of Convention and Visitors Bureau. So you've just tackled a number of big issues. This is a smaller issue, but it's addressed in the Bemidji shifting or additional lodging tax to pay for operation and maintenance costs as well as future capital costs for the Sanford Center. If you're familiar, I testified in front of the division on this for the Convention Center Association. There's about 50 centers, convention and visitors bureaus around the state, and you have them in your districts. And I've alerted them and asked them to contact you, so hopefully it will. That lodging tax by statute is supposed to be dedicated to promotion and marketing, to draw more people, to draw more money into your communities, to help projects like the Sanford Center and Bemidji and other structures, but not to pay for the buildings, capitalization, or the operation and maintenance. That's a big horse out of the barn, and if this were to continue, you're going to see more of these every year. Now you're going to ask about Rochester and or Mall of America. They are two of the bigger cities that were grandfathered out before the state lodging tax law was passed, so that's why you're seeing some bigger numbers. I think it was 6% lodging tax in Rochester, and Mall of America Bloomington is bigger, higher, I should say, because of the size of the project. But those are grandfathered cities. Think about the smaller cities out there from Chatfield and St. Cloud and cities like that promote and market their cities and their areas. And to have that money not dedicated or committed to promoting their areas to draw more people is a slippery slope, and we would encourage you not to go there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Botzik.
Thank you.
Mr. Haveman, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, my name is Mark Haveman. I'm Executive Director of the Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence, a research and education organization supporting sound tax policy and accountable government. I'd just like to offer maybe one general comment that maybe applies to the bill in total. We had the good fortune to study Minnesota competitiveness, business competitiveness over the past year, and released a study about it earlier this year, looking at both foundational competitiveness, which is captured by the sort of public good investments that we need to make in a state, as well as the cost and tax climate of the state, and looked at the relationship between those two. I just want to share with you one particular finding that we had that we think is relevant to this general debate, and that pertains to the issue of whether or not Minnesota has a lower margin of error in being a tax outlier. Dr. Michael Porter of the Harvard Institute of Study for Competitiveness has a metric called traded cluster strength, which is sort of a measure that examines the richness of interconnected businesses and networks that he finds is strongly related to economic growth and development. And what we found in our study is that many of the high-tax states that Minnesota typically considers peers also score extremely well on traded cluster strength. Massachusetts in the top 10, Maryland in the top 10, New York in the top 10. Minnesota ranks 39th in the nation, 44th on a trend basis. So we think that has implications for thinking about whether or not Minnesota is an irresistible place, or a place where business has to be regardless of its tax and cost climate. And that's something that we're concerned about, especially in the context of the top marginal income tax rate. Clearly, the evidence on mobility of income tax in response to income tax increases is mixed. Anybody can sort of find their proponents, and research supports their position. But I think it's fairly safe to say that at least none of the research that I've looked at would capture the significance of the increase that we're talking about with this new fourth tier, specifically with the surcharge on top of it. So if nothing else, we offer that for your careful consideration. We do think it would be a significant experiment in the irresistibility of Minnesota as a place to do business. And if nothing else, I'm sure that public finance scholars would descend upon the state in the future to sort of see what happens if we embark on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Haveman. Members, we don't have many folks left that we're aware of. Few other testimony, and then please, yes, both of you, come on up. And then we're going to take up some Hortman's bill after we get through the public testimony, and we'll come back to the bill later. But welcome to the committee. Thanks for waiting. I know people have been waiting all day, so thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to testify today. My name is Kirsten Pauley. I'm a registered geologist and a registered civil engineer. I've spent almost 30 years working in the environmental engineering field, particularly with many mining companies. I worked in the last several years in the sand mining industry, in mine planning, environmental review, and permitting. And I'm here today on behalf of the Minnesota Industrial Sand Council. My testimony today, I'd just like to focus on page 184 of the proposed bill, line items 184.8 through 184.14, which define a qualified processor. And in this proposed language, there are specific best management practices which are aimed at preventing silica and particulate matter from becoming airborne in a mining operation. And my testimony today would just be that we believe that including specific best management practices is not necessary in the legislation. There's a number of best management practices that do reduce particulate emissions and silica emissions, and each mining site is unique. It has unique geology and hydrogeology characteristics. It has a unique mine plan and processing facilities on it, and there are a number of best management practices that an operator can utilize in order to meet the standard. The way that it's written, it might be interpreted that a qualified processor must mine and wet process on a year-round basis, which currently is only one operator in Minnesota, and many of the existing mining operations and proposed facilities are seasonal facilities. And they mine and they wet process in the spring, summer, and fall, and then they temporarily stop their washing and mining during the winter months when it's frozen. This requires that they have a stockpile of washed sand that is fed throughout the winter into the dry plant. And the washed sand has all the fine particles removed from it already, so it represents a very low potential for fugitive emissions. There's other best management practices that also further reduce the potential. These mining facilities and processing facilities are all voluntarily establishing ambient air monitoring networks that prove out the effectiveness of the best management practices. And all of these facilities are required to have an air emissions permit from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and they're all required to abide by the federal and state ambient air quality standards. And so the means at how they get about complying with those standards, there should be some flexibility. And so we just would recommend that the reference to specific best management practices be removed from that language.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Pauley. Welcome, Ms. Rocco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kay Rocco, and I am the Director of Public Policy for NIOP, representing commercial real estate developers, owners, and managers, and the tens of thousands of businesses that are the tenants in the buildings we own and manage. I just have a couple of things in the bill that I would like to address. One is the street maintenance fee tax. We have a lot of concerns about that, and I don't need to say anything more because I know you've heard from a lot of our coalition partners previous to this. The other concern that I want to address is the use of the fiscal disparities pool to finance a portion of the expansion at the Mall of America. Because the fiscal disparities pool is totally reliant on commercial and industrial property taxes, it is of natural concern to our members and the tenants in the buildings, as well as other metro business property taxpayers, and we're concerned for two reasons. Number one, permitting the fiscal disparities pool to be used as a direct subsidy for either a private or a public project sets up unwelcome precedents, in our opinion, which could open the door for similar favored projects in other communities to come forward. And so we're very concerned that setting the precedence of using this as a funding mechanism, we're just real concerned about that. And the bottom line, other concern for us is, regardless of how these projects or these deals may be structured, as business property taxpayers, we're always just a little bit paranoid, and we feel that ultimately, regardless of how they're structured, we will pick up the financing of these projects. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Rocco. Further testimony? Great. Okay, so we're through everybody that I'm aware of. We're going to stop considering the tax bill right now for a while, and we're going to hear Representative Hortman's bill. And I think a little preface on this. We talked about this a little bit in taxes yesterday. Nice to see you, Mr. Verbrugge. I never know how to say your name. I call him Jamie Verbrugge. And in a past life, we served on a board together when I was on a city council, on the Bloomington City Council. This proposal, members, you might have heard about it in committee before. If not, the governor and the speaker and the Senate Majority Leader were connected, I think, with Deed maybe is going to talk to us, I don't know, about a potential company who is looking to come to Representative Hortman's district. And they wrote a letter a couple months ago saying that they would be interested in giving some tax incentives if they would come here. And so we're just going to hear what we know about this bill now. It is on the spreadsheet, as was mentioned last night, but it's a preliminary number. And of course, if the committee doesn't think we should do this, we're not going to do it. But we did include what we think the money might be, guessing, on the spreadsheet in the tail. So with that, I'm going to move Representative Hortman's bill so we can see what they have to tell us about it, and I think Representative Hortman's learning too. So I'll move House File 1781 to be before the committee. Representative Hortman, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. There's a manufacturing facility in my district that has been dormant for the last few years. It's a highly specialized manufacturing facility that was built some years ago for a company who ultimately, I believe, didn't receive FDA approval for their drug. It was subsequently purchased by another company that didn't quite make it and has been sitting there empty since then. So what House File 1781 does is it helps the city in their efforts that they've been undergoing in the last few years to get somebody in that building who can use that highly specialized manufacturing facility. When I spoke with the tax chair about this bill briefly, I asked, are these the types of, and when I talked to Deed in the city, are these the types of packages that we put together customarily when we're dealing with attracting business to the state of Minnesota? And what House File 1781 is that customary step that we often take in providing a sales tax exemption for the costs of the materials in expanding the facility. And Jamie Verbrugge is here from the City of Brooklyn Park to add a little bit to what I've said.
Manager Verbrugge, did you notice that Representative Hortman kind of had a hard time saying your name too? Could you tell us, is it Verbrugge? Yeah. Is that how you say it?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jamie Verbrugge. I'm the city manager in Brooklyn Park. You both had it correct. It's a pleasure to be in front of your committee again.
Welcome. And maybe you can clue us in a little bit about the process here, because we understand that no one really knows the name of the company, because this is a typical situation where it's people have signed agreements to not disclose the company as they're considering Minnesota for a location. Mr. Verbrugge, if you could tell us what you know, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, I will. Representative Hortman had the essence of it correct. And let me start just at the local level, that we do have a highly specialized, highly valued property in Brooklyn Park that has been sitting vacant for a number of years. If you understand Brooklyn Park circumstances through the course of the last 5 years, we've been hit particularly hard by the recession. Our tax base has been decimated as much as any community in the metro area. And so these types of economic development initiatives are really important for us to try to stabilize our tax base. And we're on the road to recovery. It was just reported last week Brooklyn Park is leading the metro, at least our peer communities, over the last 2 years in job growth. So this is continuing a really good story in terms of what we're doing to try and grow jobs, really good paying, highly skilled, highly technical jobs in Brooklyn Park. The company that we've been negotiating with, you're correct, Madam Chair, there is a non-disclosure agreement that is in place. They have given me permission this afternoon to confirm their identity is Baxter out of Illinois. And what they're really doing is presenting an opportunity for the state of Minnesota in an emergent industry in health sciences called biosimilars or biologics. This is an industry that does not have a footprint in the state of Minnesota and very little presence in our country, frankly. So really it's an opportunity for Minnesota to take an industry-leading position and to partner with a company that's interested in making a significant investment in the state of Minnesota. The legislation requires at least a $50 million capital investment. The agreement that we've been working with will also provide some incentives for job creation. Like I said, they are highly paid, highly skilled jobs. We're looking at average annual incomes of about $75,000 a year. There's a strong partnership that will be in place with higher ed institutions, specifically the technical colleges through the Minnesota State College University System, MINSCU. And I think that really demonstrates how good economic development can be done well when the state and the locals and higher ed institutions all partner together to attract business to Minnesota that wouldn't otherwise be here were it not for the details that are in this proposal. So having said that, Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you for any questions you might have, or turn it back over to Representative Hortman.
If I may, I just want to tell committee members, if you look at the spreadsheet for the tax bill that we went through last night, and we said it was on here, it's line 84. You can see, there's no name, but so it'll be Hortman. And you can see right above that the bill is Representative Beard's for Emerson is the same thing. So Beard is line 83, Hortman 84. We have the Norton, a sales tax construction exemption. So it's a sales tax exemption on construction materials and a TIF district. Is that correct? Okay. So we have Garofalo and Davids. And did you want to say something, Representative Hortman? I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that the Department of Revenue and DEED are here to answer any questions if people have questions for them.
Thank you. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. First of all, Representative Hortman, why is it retroactive?
Representative Hortman, or if you want to call on DEED.
I think I will call on DEED for that and speak to that piece.
I think the DEED folks are the ones who usually try to put these packages together. And maybe we can pull up another chair for Representative Hortman. Always self-sufficient, Representative Hortman. Welcome. Why is the sales tax exemption request retroactive?
Madam Chair, it's retroactive because of the purchase of the facility was actually purchased.
Okay. Okay, Representative.
Earlier when it was.
Thank you.
That's why it's back to the first of the year when we actually started these conversations.
Can we get your name on the tape?
Jim Gromberg.
Okay.
Department of Employment and
Thank you.
Development.
Well, that's interesting. So this started at the beginning of the year. I was first made aware maybe a month or two ago when Representative Thiessen, Speaker Thiessen, told me that the governor and the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader had signed a letter to an unnamed company. So I didn't know how long it's been going on, so thank you.
They contacted us back in October is when the conversations actually started.
Okay, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. And Madam Chair and to DEED, So why isn't it that Minnesota's existing incredibly business-friendly taxes and regulations are not sufficient enough to get this business to locate here?
That sounds like a political question.
Representative Garofalo, you and I voted for a little economic development project last year, Viking Stadium. And I think that we both would agree that we wish that people would make decisions based upon just looking at Minneapolis is a great place to have a stadium and build it themselves. But you and I and others voted for that because we knew we were in competition. And we knew that this is part of how the game is played. And if you want a facility like that, a team like that, to be in your jurisdiction, you got to step up and play the game. It's my understanding this manufacturer is looking at other jurisdictions too. And so do we want the jobs? Do we want $300 million worth of investment? Or do we not want?
Madam Chair.
Garofalo, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Hortman. Thank you for segueing the conversation to a place I'd like to go. First of all, this bill is, reasonable. You put in place the investments here. So good content, good subject matter. Representative Hortman, absolutely disastrous timing. We've got a bill before us that has, in fiscal year 17, it's going to have $1 million in savings to a business. At the same time, we have an omnibus tax bill that's raising over $2.6 billion in taxes, disproportionately on the businesses of Minnesota. So my question for you is that if lower taxes incentivize job providers to expand and create jobs here, what do $2.6 billion in higher taxes do to the job market and to our private sector economy?
Representative Hortman.
Representative Garofalo, this committee this year will make, of course, different policy choices than the one that was chaired over the last 2 years. And I think that the policies that we're pursuing, making a fairer tax code so that more middle-class Minnesotans pay a fairer tax compared to the very wealthy is the way that we're going to make policy decisions this year. And it's because we prioritize jobs and the middle class, and I think we've done a good job. When Representative Davids was the chair of this committee, I remember some policy choices I didn't agree with. I remember taking the renter's refund from disabled people and little old ladies to give a property tax cut to corporations that didn't ask for it. And so I think that the policy choices that are made in this year's bill are a lot better than the ones that were made 2 years ago.
Madam Chair, Representative Hortman, just to be clear, I recognize that you guys won the last election, and you're going to raise taxes as much as you want. You guys are in total control. There's nothing that I and my Republican colleagues can do to stop it. What I want to know is I want to understand the logic. We have a bill here that's being created as a jobs bill on the premise that we are going to lower the amount of taxation that a new business is going to pay coming into Minnesota. We seem to be recognizing the fact that if we can help reduce costs for businesses, it's going to mean more jobs, more middle-class jobs, greater economic expansion in our state. And at the very same time we're doing that, we have a colossal tax increase that is pounding the private sector. Now, I understand that I have a different philosophy than the Democrat Party. I get it. What I don't understand is how at the same time the Democrats can be proposing huge tax increases on businesses and then coming to us and saying our strategy to create jobs is to lower the taxes for one business. Explain, I understand different philosophies. Explain that difference to me of how raising taxes doesn't kill jobs, but cutting taxes does create jobs.
Representative Horton.
Representative Lenczewski, Representative Garofalo, this bill is about bringing jobs to the community of Brooklyn Park. It's about bringing 190 good-paying jobs to the city of Brooklyn Park. It's about the state of Minnesota making a modest investment in a $300 million investment in the state of Minnesota. If you're not for that, then vote no. I'm for that kind of activity in the state of Minnesota.
Madam Chair, Representative Hortman, I'm very much in favor of reducing the cost of businesses doing business in Minnesota to create jobs. What I'm trying to figure out is how can the Democrats be simultaneously saying they agree with me at the time when they want to raise taxes on businesses. And it's not just business that's saying it. It's not just the Chamber of Commerce, Representative Hortman. Labor and industry agree that the omnibus tax bill kills jobs. Explain to me how cutting taxes is good, but raising taxes isn't bad if you're in support of this bill.
Representative Hortman, we're off your bill, but if you'd like to respond, and Mr. Verbury, we're going to hope to get back on the bill. Representative Hortman.
Madam Chair, I'll just let Representative Garofalo's speech stand for itself.
Okay, well, Madam Chair and Representative Hortman, if we don't want to answer the question, I will open it up to any Democrat of the Tax Committee then. This is very much related to this bill. Any Democrat in this committee, explain to me why we are cutting taxes for one business to create jobs, but billions of dollars in tax increase, that's your strategy to create jobs for this state, is to grow government. Any Democrat in the committee want to respond to me and explain to me the logic of that?
Representative Garofalo, I'd be happy to. First, I'd like to say, members, that we have afforded bipartisanly the courtesy of this committee to allow members to have their bills heard on the items of their bills. They've been allowed to put their amendments on in the order that they'd like them, and we've bipartisanly just put them on, and we haven't turned members' bills into a tax debate. And so, I hope that the next 4 people on the list don't want to do that, but maybe they do. So we are actually happy to see the folks from Brooklyn Park here, indeed. But I'm happy to answer that question. Representative Garofalo, we all make choices here, and to the bill before us, there is a sales tax exemption on construction, as is a number of provisions in the Omnibus Tax bill for Representative Beard for other companies. What the good tax policy, in my estimation on that, whether you're for or against tax increases, is you don't receive that unless you do the construction. Now, when you give someone a property tax cut that's already here, you're not bringing a new job here. You can make a competitiveness argument, but the only way that this business can get this tax benefit is to come here and build. So these are, if you look at the menu of what you can give businesses for incentives, I think most economists, conservative economists, would agree that this is the better way to provide a subsidy than just a broad vanilla tax cut in hopes that someone might create a job somewhere. The only way this company, and now we've heard the name, can get this tax benefit is if they actually come here. So I think there is a very different set of tax policy going on as it relates to this provision compared to other ways that are broad. Now, I could ask Ms. Dalton. Ms. Dalton, could you tell the committee, could you opine maybe, what would it cost if we gave all construction a sales tax exemption in the state going forward, as opposed to letting folks come to us and tell us about their project before, as we decided, like with Representative Beard, that we thought his project in Shakopee for Emerson was a good idea and it's now in the bill. Can you guess what it might cost if that was a broad policy for the state?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I would not like to actually venture an opinion on that. That bill has never been offered by anybody in the legislature in my 27 years here.
Okay, well, Representative Garofalo, that certainly could be an amendment. I would imagine it's hundreds of millions of dollars that you could offer when we do markup, which is not during this bill. This is actually a member's bill, and I know we're going to have a lot of fun having those debates over the next couple of weeks here, but I do think there's a significant difference in policy. I'm happy to answer this because I think, with the public who's watching and listening to us, it's easy to think that all Democrats love to raise taxes and all Republicans love to cut them, and it's not true. It's also easy to think that Democrats like to spend and Republicans don't, and that's not true. We are a variety of people with a lot of different philosophies, and I recognize that as a group, one side has a bunch of, philosophies and the other has another. But it is this committee that's supposed to methodically think through which of these makes the most sense and put people through the paces. And I think this proposal that we're hearing now is pretty vanilla. This is a pretty standard one that folks come in and ask for and is usually granted if it means you're coming here, not you're already here, you're coming here. So you're a net new. So I see this as a very different and good tax policy, and the fact that I'm willing to vote to raise revenue this year, and Representative Garofalo, you're not, that's okay. But that's separate from this bill. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to be clear, the first comments I made were in compliments to the author and the subject matter of this bill, and I said it was horrible timing. So on the subject matter, the content of this bill, absolutely. But the reality, Madam Chair, is that the comments you made, I don't think the people who are making charitable donations in this state are doing anything wrong. And the provisions in your tax bill do that. They punish them for making, yes, they take away the limits on deductions for charitable contributions. And so what I'm trying to understand here is we have a bill in which the chair, a Democrat author, are making the case for why the existing tax structure in Minnesota does not provide enough incentives for business to expand and locate here. A perfectly reasonable plan that both sides have voted in favor of. What the Republicans haven't done, and the Democrats haven't done until now, is dumped $2.6 billion of tax increases on a state with only 5.3 million people. Even the most objective and independent analysis has to be that that is not reasonable, that is not sensible, that is extreme tax policy. And so I don't think I've gotten any farther with my answer today. It seems like in this situation, the majority party believes that a tax break is good and that we want private sector businesses to come here. But in the vast majority of other cases, that's just not the case. And we're going to pound businesses into the ground because there's no amount of money that is too big to take from the private sector and put it into the public sector. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've got Representative Davids, Dabney, Anderson, Zellers, and Earhart. And members, I really hope folks can refrain from telling people what they think. It's okay to say what you think, but to speak for others and say this party thinks that or whatever, I don't think that's accurate. So, Representative Garofalo, I know you've said many times this year what I think and what Democrats think, but I think it's more helpful if you tell us what you think, rather than the party opposite. You have to start the sentence with "I" is how that works, rather than you.
Well, I'll tell you. I think you
are wrong. I think you are wrong.
I think that no objective person can take a look at this tax bill and reach any other conclusion than the fact that the state of Minnesota is going for a ride. That we are going for a ride with a legislative majority that has no adult supervision with regards to the private sector. Right now, we have labor and business agreeing that the proposals in this bill are going to wipe out industries, whole industries in the state of Minnesota. That's what I think.
And I appreciate that. Members, I think we want to get back to Representative Hortman's bill, and we're going to have a lot of time to watch members on multiple roll calls decide if they would like to solve the budget this way and not. And I think, we know how each other feel about that. I just think, folks will be surprised that people feel just as strongly on the opposite side, and there's not a lot of fear here. I know it doesn't feel that way to folks maybe, but Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the gentleman from Brooklyn Park. I also just have a few comments. Actually, Representative Hortman, I kind of like this bill, and I was kind of with you till you said Chair Davids in the last tax bill was hurting little old ladies and seniors. I'd like to tell you what I think about that.
Thank you.
But to the bill.
Davids, remember I did bring donuts that one time.
Yes, you did, and it's very sorrowful that business is going to be closing up here April 30th. It's certainly a great bakery, and I should have done more to keep it open. With that being said, I agree with the chair. This is pretty standard vanilla stuff here. But I do have a question of the gentleman from Brooklyn Park, because I'm not going to try and say your name. If I'm a little confused here, as Representative Garofalo, his first question was, what's the retroactive thing here? And we want to recruit them or have them come into Minnesota, and we want to welcome them with open arms. But haven't they already made the decision to come here if they've already purchased the property, or what am I missing there, Madam Chair, and to the gentleman from Brooklyn Park?
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, and committee members, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe they have fully made that decision. They were operating on a timeline that was not their own in terms of purchasing the facility. So the investment that they've made to buy the facility is significant. It's about $10 million, but it's because that facility was being sold at cents on the dollar because of the fact that the previous owner recognized that there was not much of a market for it and had basically written down the property. So I think for the company, it's a measured risk on their part, but I don't think that they have fully made that decision to go forward just because they have signed the purchase agreement on the facility. So I don't want to stick my foot in the previous conversation, but I will say that in terms of Minnesota's tax system, whether it's competitive or not, it really isn't whether it's Minnesota versus North Dakota or Iowa or Alabama or Georgia. It's really Minnesota's place in the international economy, because my understanding is that these types of industries look at any number of business plans. So they could do greenfield development internationally, which would be cheaper land, cheaper labor, cheaper materials. They could choose to operate here in what is going to be a retrofitted, renovated existing facility, which really is good for us and good for the state. Or they could look at some other business enterprise where they didn't have to build facility and could go to contracted service. So when they're looking at their different business potential, I think that what we're hearing from them is that this is their preference, but it isn't their only option. And so I think we'd be missing out on a huge opportunity, not just for the state, but for our community to maintain a vital asset in the community.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm looking at this House File 1781, and I would certainly support, from what I know, including the Omnibus Tax Bill. Madam Chair, I'm struggling. I want to vote for that tax bill so badly because, I mean, there's some really, really good things in there from DMC, from some of the different things, but there's also some things that I will just say that I have some concerns about. So I am actually really struggling with that whole issue to move this thing forward. But I would certainly support getting this in the bill, and like I'm a huge supporter of DMC as they had originally presented, and as you have it in the bill. It's we will work it. I could support that up to this point unless there would be some possible amendment put on that would make it so I couldn't vote for the bill at all. But with that being said, I did look up Sleater-Kinney. Yes. They were a band from 1994 to 2006, a riot. Now, I would never question the chair, but I'm just a poor farm boy from Section 28, Sumner Township, Fillmore County, and they are a riot girl, alternative rock, indie rock, punk rock band made up of Carrie Brownstein, Corin Tucker, and Janet Weiss. So I would never question your taste of music, but I'm kind of in the country myself, punk rock. But you were correct.
Nobody in this room know that band?
I love them.
Okay. No. You knew who they were?
After I
Googled. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. See, now somebody who's younger understands that band, so thank you very much.
And they broke up, the band broke up in 2006.
Representative Dabney, Anderson, Zellers, Earhart. We'd like to be done at 5. We're going to recess, and then we're going to take a break, and we're going to take up the transportation bill. But we'll recess by 5. Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's interesting insight into the chair. Well, I'd like to be on the conference committee. It is there. I mean, there is an interesting debate here in the room as to what's more business friendly: a state with a balanced budget that's been dealt with in a forthright, honest way that provides stability and predictability for voters, business community, homeowners, whoever in the state, or one that would continue to lurch from crisis to crisis because of an unwillingness to deal as an adult with the state's real budget problems. So I think we'll have more chance, I imagine, to debate that. But right now, I completely missed the gentleman from Deed's name. But I've got a question for you, sir. How about, sir, can you'll answer to that. You referenced MnSCU as part of your discussion, I believe. And, Mr. Van Brugge, sorry. I'm not seeing any references to MnSCU here, and I'm thinking of Chair Marquardt's conversations in K-12 and the goal of building 21st century workforce and the best workforce, and clearly there's some opportunity here to increase the skills of the Minnesota workforce and then hopefully build off of this. But I'm not seeing MnSCU in the bill, and I'm just trying to understand. I was reading the bill while you were talking, and I apologize. What's that relationship? How does that work?
Jim Gromberg from Department of Employment and Economic Development. The MnSCU part of this would be through the Job Skills Training Program, which wouldn't be part of this. We would set up a job skills training grant that they would do through one of the MnSCU institutions, come back and set up a specific training program for employees that be at this. So that's really the role that would play, but it wouldn't be in this bill itself. That's an existing program that they would be able to take advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Anderson, Zellers, Earhart. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And is it Mr. Grumber, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions for you. I know that TEED is usually very involved in securing businesses to the state of Minnesota, and a lot of times you get a peek into other states that are competing for this business. First, can you tell me what states are competing for this business?
The sites.
And can you speak up? I have a hard time hearing. I apologize.
The site selector has not shared those with us.
Okay.
On who exactly we would be competing with, but most of the competition was on an international basis. This was one of the few facilities in the United States that existed that would allow them to move into and renovate without building from a greenfield.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Grumberg, when we're competing either on the international level or on a state-to-state level, can you tell me what have been their requests? Obviously, they probably have come back to you and say, well, we can get X, Y, and Z from here. How does that compare to Minnesota? Can you give me an idea of what they're looking for in particular besides this bill?
Mr. Grumberg.
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, they come back, and when we start these processes, there'll be a matrix, and what it will talk about is what assistance is available, be it TIF, be it state investments, be it educational assistance, and then as we work forward, then they will rank those based upon the variety of sites that they're considering, and then they'll pick usually the top 2 or 3, and then come back to the states and say, okay, what about this? What about this? Can we move forward on this? What we try to do is at the beginning, when they bring out that matrix, which is generally their laundry list of everything, if we have the opportunity to say, this could be done under special legislation or this could be done through this program, we like to provide that information up front so that they get a clear picture of what's available through the state of Minnesota.
And Madam Chair and Mr. Grumber, can you go through that laundry list of what they were looking for?
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, I don't have the full list with me. Ballpark. The ballpark was job skills training, tax abatement, tax assistance, reducing the costs of bringing employees here, utility costs, how the utility costs can be mitigated, are there special utility programs. So it will cover everything, from soup to nuts, if you will. And like I said, what we sit down and say, okay, what can we provide? And some things are just wish lists that you clearly know you're not going to do, but they still do ask those.
Okay, and Madam Chair and Mr. Grumber, so when they've come back to you, what has kind of been one of the areas that they focused on the most out of this list? Has it been primarily these items, I take it?
Primarily these items, yes.
Okay. All right, and then I appreciate that. It's kind of what I guessed. I think this is what highlights what Representative Garofalo has spoken to in the fact that our tax policy and our tax structure for our state does make a difference, and both on state-to-state level and on an international level. And I'm really concerned about the overall conversation that we're having here at the legislature and what that means to our businesses in our state. And I think it'll make Mr. Grumber's job even more taxing and difficult. I can't imagine having to compete with some of these other states and on an international level, given our current tax structure that we have. I don't envy your position in the next 2 years, but thanks for your time.
Thank you. Representative Zellers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, although maybe you didn't recognize Representative Hortman, I assumed when you were saying we should start our conversations with and the part about you Republicans giving away corporate welfare for people that didn't ask for it and hurting old ladies and people with disabilities. You meant her, but it was later in the conversation, so you didn't include her in your suggestion as to how we should proceed in tax testimony, I would assume.
I meant all of us.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, as long as it was on the record, Madam Chair, I wanted to give you the opportunity to be consistent. One of the questions I had, and this is either for Mr. Gromberg or for Mr. Verbrugge, would it be possible for us, maybe even the author of the bill, to get a copy of the letter that was signed by the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Governor?
Mr. Verbrugge, Representative Zellers, that's a good question. I had someone in the press ask me that today, and I think it is the Governor's office who may have that, but I don't know that, or maybe you do. Can anyone answer Representative Zellers, or is that part of the non-disclosure part too? Mr. Gromberg.
Madam Chair, Representative Zeller, we can check into it, and I'm sure if it's available, we can get it out to you, a copy of that letter. I would assume that it would be public record.
Thank you for that.
Without sailing
Appreciate
too
that.
far down the road.
Representative Zellers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the willingness, but I think we need a little more tenacity in your search for the letter, because if we're going to be voting on this, whether it's $10 or $7 million or $2 million, I think it's probably a pretty good idea that we at least are made aware of it. And then maybe, I think this might, either one of Mr. Gromberg or Mr. Verbrugge, is this a publicly traded company or is this a privately owned company? Is it an LLC, LLP, sole proprietorship?
Mr. Gromberg. Yes, please. We don't know.
Madam Chair and
We may not know.
representatives, I believe they're publicly traded. They're a Fortune 500 company. I can't say that with certainty.
And Representative Zellers, I should say the actual language is before us, so we have exactly what it would be, and they were passed out while we were on the floor, so people may not be aware of that, the actual, what the cost would be and exactly what the tax benefit is. So if that helps you, and there's a summary. So Representative Zellers.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason I ask for, and for both, and this is probably to the author, because as these folks are making the decision, and Mr. Gromberg is out doing all he can to tap dance and to sell as best he can with what he has, I'm just wondering if they've been made aware of this particular large 330-paged bill as a business going forward, even at the corporate rate of 9.98% or at the individual rate if it was a privately held company. The provisions, the $7 million provisions in here, I don't know that they will make up for all that's coming with this bad boy right here. And when they're planning, because I've driven by that site in Representative Hortman's district many times when it was actually filled with employees and when it's been sitting empty. So I'm just wondering if on down the road they get the full breadth and depth of this tax bill and decide that the $7 million isn't worth it. So I guess maybe for Representative Hortman, are they aware of the tax bill and the provisions that Representative Garofalo went into some great detail describing?
Representative Hortman.
Madam Chair, Representative Zellers, the company is represented by a search firm, Deloitte. And I'm sure when Deloitte is giving them advice on their site selection, they're well aware of things that are pending in various legislatures.
Representative Zellers.
Again, a little gray, which I understand, Representative Hortman, but I do think it is something, and there's no one around the table that gets to claim purity on this. I think we had an airport Z zone a few years ago that was going to be That's yours? That was going to be the be-all, end-all and make us an international shipping center of North America, and didn't quite pan out. So it's not that anyone hasn't tried these before, but I do think any business looking at our state and looking at the tax bill that is before this body tonight and saying that later on down the road, the $7 million we're looking at today may not make up for the millions or hundreds of millions of dollars that will come out of this tax bill. So, Madam Chair, I do appreciate not wanting to get into the political, but when the author of the bill accuses us of hurting senior citizens and folks that may or may not have some challenges in life, and especially the devoted tax chair, who I'm very, very fond of and appointed to be tax chairman, we then dive into the political, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Zellers. Representative Earhart, then we are going to recess. Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was sitting here thinking about this tax debate that's beginning to develop and how mean-spirited it's going to be, and I thought, the last four Republican governors really were instrumental in raising the taxes across the state. Lander started the sales tax. Quee had a surcharge on. Carlson raised the sales tax. Plenty had his health care impact. So all four of those Republican governors, now you disclaim them all, I suppose, but what happened to the forward-thinking progressive Republicans that used to inherit the state? They looked forward and did things for Minnesota, and they raised taxes. You know, at the same time, the icon of conservatism, President Reagan signed into law the largest tax increase in U.S. history, along with the largest gas tax in U.S. history, saying that our forefathers built the infrastructure and we ought to take care of it. Now we have something that's happening, mean-spirited Scrooges that appear to be the leaders of today. And I wonder about that. What's wrong? What's wrong? That's my little salute.
Okay, with that, we are going to lay over. We are going to lay over this bill for possible inclusion in the Omnibus Tax Bill. Representative Davids wants to say something, as do I. The DFL members are going to meet in room 500 North while we are in recess. Representative Davids.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, maybe if you could give us a bit of a timeline. I would like to say that Governor Levander did veto the sales tax, but was overridden by the legislature. So that being said, but anyways, I would like to just send an out.
That calls for a response. He gave permission, the override, to Representative Overgaard.
Okay.
And Overgaard stood in a bunch of Republicans not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and told the whole story.
And I would,
sometime I'll tell you the story.
And I would like to thank the other assistant historian of the tax committee. I believe Joel Michael is the historian. Representative Earhart and I are assistant historians. And that being said, just an announcement. We'll have a Republican meeting in my office at 5 o'clock as soon as we go into recess. And then I've told the chair I have to go to a previous engagement in Mankato by 8, so I'll have to leave about probably a little after 6. And so I don't know how the chair wants to handle that. I don't, yes. but so I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Representative Davidson, we have been talking. I hope to come back at 5:30 and finish the transportation bill by 6. And then we'll see where folks want to go next on the omnibus tax bill. We got to get the transportation bill done, and I don't think there's a lot there for us to get into. And then by 6, I know you have to leave. But we'll see what members want to do as it relates to amendments and where we're going from there. And I hope to talk to you too, Representative Davis, before then.
4 or 5.
Okay. Okay. With that, thank you, Representative Hortman and everyone. We are in recess, and we'll be back at 5:30.